All right, today we're diving into one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, sometimes challenging attributes of God, his righteousness. It's this concept that forms the very bedrock of who he is, and it shapes absolutely everything he does, from the promises he makes to the judgments he carries out.
This question, asked thousands of years ago by Abraham, it just cuts right to the heart of everything, doesn't it? It's not just some philosophical idea. It's a deeply human cry for assurance that the one in charge of the entire universe is in fact just. And it's this question that's going to be our guide today.
So, to even begin to answer Abraham's question, we have to get on the same page. We need to build a solid foundation. What do we actually mean when we use this word, the righteousness of God?
At its most basic level, righteousness is all about being morally right. It's about justice in action. But when we talk about God, this isn't some mood he's in or a choice he makes from time to time. No, it's his perfectly unwavering, absolutely consistent moral character. He always does what is right.
And the Bible connects these dots for us all the time. Look at what Nehemiah says here. It's so plain. God keeps his promises because he is righteous. His actions are a direct, perfect outflow of his character. One can't be separated from the other.
Now, here's a really helpful way to think about it. If God's holiness is his pure, set-apart nature, who he is in and of himself, then his righteousness is how that holiness gets put into practice. It's holiness in action. One is his being, the other is his behavior.
And this leads us to a mind-bending, absolutely crucial point. God doesn't consult some cosmic rulebook to figure out what's right. He doesn't look to a standard of justice that exists outside of himself. He is the standard. He is justice itself.
Okay, so this is all a bit abstract, right? Let's ground it in a real story. The incredible account of Abraham, his nephew Lot, and the city of Sodom gives us this powerful case study, and it shows the stark contrast between God's perfect righteousness and, well, our own.
And notice something really important here. When God decides to judge Sodom, he doesn't just zap the city out of existence. No, he brings Abraham into the conversation. He lets him question, bargain, intercede. This shows us that God's justice is never rash or arbitrary. It's transparent. It comes after investigation, after warning, and with incredible patience.
And then you've got Lot. His story is it's a slow-motion tragedy. It's this gradual slide that starts with a seemingly practical choice, the best land. But that leads to compromise, moving into the city. Then comes total integration into its corrupt system. And in the end, even though God rescues him, he loses almost everything. It's a perfect picture of human righteousness. So fragile, so inconsistent.
Now here's the thing. Lot's story isn't just about Lot. It's a mirror. It points to this huge, universal problem that's at the very heart of the human experience. This massive, unbridgeable gap between God's perfect standard and our own failing reality.
And if you think that's just an Old Testament thing, Jesus comes along and just blows the lid off it. He points to the most religious, rule-following, outwardly righteous people of his day and says their righteousness isn't even close to being enough. So if their best efforts fall short, what hope do any of us have? So you see the tension, right? This is the critical question. If God is perfectly righteous and his standard is perfection, but our own righteousness is consistently failing and falling apart, how could we possibly stand before him? It seems hopeless.
But thankfully, the story doesn't end there. The answer to this crisis isn't try harder. The answer is something completely divine. It's a solution that only God could come up with, often called the Great Exchange, and it's the absolute core of the Christian faith.
This one verse explains everything. In this incredible divine transaction, God orchestrates a swap. Jesus, who was without sin, who was perfect righteousness, took all of our sin onto himself, and in exchange, his perfect righteousness is offered to us. You see, God doesn't lower his standard, he meets it for us.
Now there's a fancy theological word for this, imputation. But don't let the word scare you, it's basically an accounting term. It just means to credit something to someone else's account. And the Bible shows us this incredible threefold transaction that takes place.
Let's just break it down. Step 1. Adam's sin gets credited to all of humanity. That's our default state, our starting point. Step 2, for anyone who believes, all of our sin gets credited to Christ's account on the cross. But it's not over. Step 3 is the miracle. Christ's perfect righteousness gets credited to our account. It's a complete transfer.
Okay, so that's the theology. But what does all of this actually mean for you, for me, in our everyday lives? Well, the implications are really different depending on where you are in your journey. So let's look at two distinct paths.
First, I want to talk directly to anyone who's listening to this, and maybe you're just exploring these ideas. Maybe you haven't yet put your faith in Christ. This next part is for you.
See, for you, this whole idea changes the most fundamental question you could ask. It's no longer, am I a good enough person? It's not, am I trying hard enough to meet God's standard? The real question, the only question that matters, is this. Have you stopped trying to earn it, and have you simply believed in Jesus and received His righteousness as a free gift?
Okay, now let's shift gears. For those of us who have believed, for those who have already received this incredible gift, what does this mean for how we're supposed to live day in and day out?
For us, this truth is total freedom. It means our standing with God is not a roller coaster based on how well we performed this week. It is absolutely secure in Christ's righteousness, and that changes everything. It frees us from judging other people harshly. It frees us from getting anxious and upset when wicked people seem to be winning. It frees us from the need to get our own revenge. Why? Because we can truly, deeply rest, trusting that the judge of all the earth will, in the end, do right.
But we can't stop there. As we wrap this up, we have to look at the other side of this coin, because God's righteousness isn't just a warm, comforting truth. It is also a deeply, deeply sobering one. And this brings us to one final, unavoidable question. If God is perfectly just, if He must act according to His righteous character, what happens when His incredible, gracious provision of righteousness is rejected? You see, the very same attribute that offers salvation is also the attribute that must, eventually, judge.
Because God's righteousness doesn't just justify the believer, it must also judge unbelief. And that brings us directly to the topic of our next explainer, the difficult but absolutely necessary doctrine of the wrath of God. Thanks for joining me.